Why do most podcasts fail and end up in pod fade? Or maybe I should say, why do most podcast hosts end up dropping their shows? I read a stat somewhere recently that 70% of podcasts that get started don't make it past 1 year of production. That's crazy, isn't it? We all know that having a podcast is such a powerful way to educate our community about the work we do in the world, but yet producing a podcast is a lot of work. It can be expensive. And here's what I discovered that a lot of coaches and service providers who hear they should have a podcast don't actually have a clear vision of how that podcast fits into their business model and how they can monetize it so that they want to continue the podcast. Hey, it's Melanie Benson here. And I am the host. I'm very grateful to be the host of Top 1.5% Show Amplifier Success. We are getting ready to hit 350 episodes this week, actually. And last week I shared a big milestone here on Facebook. If you're listening to this somewhere else later, then just know this was like meaningful to me. We hit 100K in downloads. And I had so many supportive comments when I posted that on Facebook that it spurred me to ask the community here, if you want to hear how my podcast business model works and how we set it up so it's adding another 100K in new revenues each year. And just to make sure everybody understands, like, this is a strategically designed show. So you resoundingly said yes, and I'll be following up with all of you that said yes, please podcast, so you can see this. I am going to unpack the strategy over 3 shorter videos this week because it's big. Like, there are pieces to it, and there may be certain pieces you're more interested in. So that way I can cover more, but it won't be like a super long 2-hour masterclass, right? So, one of the things in particular I want to do is I have 5 key elements that I integrate to create not just a successful podcast, but to turn it into actual monetizable business. And one of the key pieces of that is what I call my binge to buy strategy. I know it sounds really hypey, but it's actually a very, very powerful part of constructing a podcast and designing it so that it's actually a lead nurturing system. So I will get into that in part 2 because this is such a critical piece of how it all works. And honestly, like, I didn't actually see that part coming. That wasn't part of the initial strategy. But because I test everything with my show, I test different things. I think we're like going into year 6 now of this podcast. I had a podcast before, which, by the way, I did all wrong. And I learned a lot about what not to do so that this podcast could be much more aligned and much more valuable, not just to me, but to my community. So one of the things about the binge to buy strategy is when that works well and you're using all the pieces, oftentimes I find that people who meet me in some way, whether it's on a stage or it's on someone else's podcast or they run across me on social media and they're kind of connecting in that relevance factor around the topic, they can binge and like immerse themselves in my podcast, and then they end up booking a consultation and hiring me usually within 7 to 10 days. And this is not just a $100 session. This is a 4 to 5 figure investment. And so I realized, wow, like, there's something really powerful about how this is all designed, where it allows the potential client, the person who's struggling with something, to hear how I show up in the world. And it's not even just about like, oh, Melanie knows her stuff. Like, there's knowledge there. They're feeling into my energy and deciding, can they trust me? Am I the real deal? Is this somebody I believe I want to work with and invest a significant amount of money to help me solve my problem? So that's a very cool thing, which I'll unpack a bit more in the part 2 of this. Now, before I deep dive into part 1 and the first 5 components of how this works, I had to say this out loud. I do not consider myself a podcaster. So there's a whole industry of people that are podcasters, and they podcast from the sheer passion of creating entertainment, creating some kind of a fun environment. And so we might say Joe Rogan is a podcaster first. If you watch the fun show, Only Murders in the Building, which my husband works on, and I'm so proud of him. He creates the look of the show with the production team, and it's just so beautiful. And it's such a great show, right? If you watch the show, give a little shout out in the comments that you're a fan of the show. Because I heard a rumor that the showrunner actually is paying attention to the social media posts that go on about the show. But anyway, I digress. But that they would be podcasters, right? And so people who are considered podcasters, they're creating entertainment. They're creating something that they're just passionate about the topic. I don't consider myself a podcaster. I thought I was for a little while, but what I really am is a business owner who hosts a podcast as part of my marketing strategy. And I think that is a really important distinction if you're considering a podcast, to know the difference. Because podcasters, there are different ways to monetize your show than when you are using as part of a marketing strategy. Very different monetization strategies. When in my toolkit, I have this toolkit called the Authority Brand Podcast Toolkit. I am showing people how to design podcasts that boost authority, that attract ideal clients, that help them monetize their overall business strategy. Okay. So that's different than a podcaster who is maybe getting sponsors and they're looking for a different approach to monetizing their show. And podcasters are considered media. Now, I do consider myself part of the media from the podcasting side. But again, I'm looking at this very different. And I share this because I think our attitude about and our clarity of what we want out of our show is critical. It's critical to making the right choices so you have invested your time, your money, and your energy in a way that produces a meaningful result for you. Okay, so this strategy to build authority with a podcast is part of a bigger strategy that I teach in my 100K Authority Accelerator program, or inside my Ignite Mastermind, right? Because I believe that to be successful as a coach, as a service provider, as a course creator, we need a way to elevate our message to be able to stand out in a sea of sameness. And, let's face it, most of us in our super crowded market, and everybody starts selling the same. So how are you going to stand out? Well, that's why I started my podcast, especially my second podcast. So I wanted a way to stand out and add value to the world and attract great clients, but to do it through something that I feel is one of my superpowers, which is interviewing people and creating expansive topics and knowledge that helps people, whether they work with me or not. Okay, so that's really the key is my authority boosting podcast strategy is knowing what you want out of your show. Now, here's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to cover 2 of the 5 key elements. Let me give you the quick overview what all 5 of them are. So, number 1 is topic optimization, and I can't wait to dig into that one today because topic optimization is where so many people drop the ball. And they don't understand how to craft and cultivate topics that draw people in. And this is the stickiness of keeping a podcast going that continues to attract new listeners and get better quality guests and the whole shebang. So topic optimization, audience growth, we'll cover those 2 today because audience growth, I mean, let's face it, like if we don't have an audience, what are we podcasting for, right? And there's a lot to having a really well-designed and developed audience that wants to keep coming back and listen. Like that's key. Then I'm going to talk about lead nurturing because that's the binge to buy technique, and it's super important. But it's very integrated, so that's going to be a whole session in itself. We'll do that as part 2. And then collaboration. So collaboration is a key component of why I started my podcast. And I don't think I even realized how valuable it was going to be in the end. And then last, marketing. This might blow your mind, but one of the not the number, but the biggest reasons that podcasts fail is they don't have a marketing strategy that works. And they're kind of in the if I build it, they will come mentality. And I can guarantee you, with the number of podcasts that are out there in the marketplace today, if you build it, they're not necessarily going to come. You need to actually be very strategic about how you market your show. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the first couple of pieces, and to also set some context that I want you to have a podcast. I'm not trying to talk you out of having a podcast. If you are a coach, if you have a service-based business, if you are a course creator, if you are a digital marketer, if you have any kind of consulting business, having a podcast can be a very powerful way to reach your ideal clients. It is one of the 5 key authority platforms I teach in the 100K Authority Accelerator program because um, having a podcast or a show, like you could take podcasts out and put online show, Facebook live streaming show, YouTube show, any of the things, and it has the same impact. It elevates your authority in the marketplace. But starting a show or a podcast doesn't necessarily solve the best kept secret syndrome. So we have to be very clear with the first thing. What do you want out of the show? Why are you starting it? So I just helped a client of mine in Ignite who she's felt like a best kept secret. We just designed her new show. And the show is designed to put her out there in the marketplace in a way that her ideal clients can not just experience her energy, but get what does she do and who is she, right? And so a show that's designed well should have a viral reach that's beyond just you to get in front of new audiences. And that's a big part of why the right show works. But just airing a show, like I've been a guest on some shows where I'm like, is anybody even listening to the show? Have you ever done that, right? Like maybe you've been a guest on someone's show and you're like, wait a minute, like there's nobody listening, like nothing's coming out of this, right? And so just airing a show, I don't believe is enough to produce the result that most of us want. Saying I host a show is great, but what's the show producing for you? And that's really where I think this strategy performs well. So let's talk about topic optimization as a way to do that. So topic optimization basically means you understand 3 key things: who your audience is, who they're not, and what is the audience you want to attract? What are they needing right now? And that's, I teach a formula called Rock's Method. And the first piece of that messaging strategy is relevance. Relevance and specificity. So it's the bookends there. And when we understand topic optimization and you use relevance, you attract people who want to hear about what you're doing. Okay, so topic optimization can be what you're putting out, what your topics are, what you are interviewing somebody around, and how you design the topic and what you put out in terms of the title of your episodes. And it can even be like the theme of your show overall, overarching theme. But I think topic optimization is so key. And just getting clear on a topic isn't enough. Like my team actually researches the keyword and the searchability of certain topics because we don't want to just appeal to the people that are already listening, although that's important. We also want to make sure that we are attracting new listeners that might be finding us on platforms that they're listening to, like Spotify or Apple Podcast or YouTube. And it does work. So topic optimization requires a little bit of thought, thinking it through. So one thing I do with a lot of my clients who host shows is to hold space for, okay, this is the message you want to get out in the world. I get it. But what is the way your audience is searching for that message? And here's where a big mistake occurs. And that is when you get super attached to a topic having to be said a certain way because that's the way you want to say it. And I know that a lot of transformational people, you're doing healing work, you're doing transformational breakthrough work, you're doing this very esoteric coaching, or you've got this process that creates breakthroughs. Like you get the download of what it is that you want to talk about. I get it. But if your audience isn't searching for that, it's going to be like putting pure gold down a well, hoping that it's getting found by the people who want the gold. But it's hidden because they can't see you if they don't feel pulled into your topic. And so I really believe that optimizing your topics and crafting titles that are compelling and magnetic and pull energy in is super important, super valuable. So that's topic optimization. And I think that when you do a good job of that, you actually have the keys to the like creating content that attracts the right people. I had somebody one time who she heard one of my podcasts, and this was several years ago, like 4 years ago, and she said, "Oh my gosh, Melanie, I felt like you created that episode for me. How did you know this is what I was struggling with?" And not only had been lurking on my social media for, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years, she said. She'd never commented on anything. She'd never like engaged with me. I didn't even know she was on my list, but she was. And that one podcast topic got her to raise her hand, book a consultation. And within 5 days of that consultation, she had enrolled in my mastermind. So it works. And really understanding the power of your topic and making sure you're mapping it back to the biggest needs of your audience is a big part of making the overall strategy work. Okay. So this first one went on a little bit longer than I intended. I'm going to unpack the next 4 pieces of this puzzle in the next 2. I don't know what to call them episodes, but we'll call it the part 2 and part 3 of this series here. And if you want to connect with me on this in a bigger way, please feel free, comment below. Let me know what's going on for you. We can slide into the DMs and you can let me know where you're at. Or if you're thinking you're starting a podcast, I'm happy to, share wisdom, connect the dots, help make sure that you're producing a podcast that is a really, really powerful part of your overall strategy. So come back to get episode or part 2, part 2, yeah, in a day or 2, and I'll keep airing them here and tagging you guys in it. So, all right, I can't wait to share the rest. See you in a couple days.